Welcome to today's webinar, How to Make 2023 Your Most Profitable Year Yet. My name is Anna Finley with Civil and Structural Engineer Media. Thank you for joining today's webinar, which is sponsored by BQE Software. Before we begin today's presentation, first some general information about the webinar and the GoToWebinar platform. The views of the speakers and organizations participating in this webinar are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Civil and Structural Engineer Media or its publisher, Zweig Group. If you have any technical difficulties while viewing this webinar, please submit questions or a brief explanation of your technical problem using the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel, and I will assist you. During the webinar, you can also submit questions to our speakers using the same Questions tab. Submit your questions at any time, and we will try to answer as many as we can later in the webinar. Zweig Group encourages group learning for our events. If you are viewing the live webinar with a group on the registered person's computer, that person must complete and submit the multiple viewer registration form in order for everyone to earn the credit. Download the multiple viewer registration form from the Handouts tab on the control panel. Today's speakers are Stephen Burns and Enoch Sears. Steve is a member of the College of Fellows of the AIA and Chief Creative Officer of BQE Software. After receiving his Master of Architecture degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Design, Steve spent 7 years at SOM working in Chicago, London, and Berlin before founding his own firm, BBA Architects, in 1993. In 2007, with 17 architects on staff, Steve sold BBA to pursue his passion for business management software, starting with his creation of ArchiOffice. In 2009, with over 600 firms using the ArchiOffice platform, Steve sold his second company to BQE Software and is now focused on the product development of BQE Core Architect, a fully integrated cloud-based firm management platform that includes time billing, invoicing, accounting, and project management for all firm sizes. Stephen is a global speaker and thought leader on topics related to firm management and emerging technologies. Enoch Sears, AIA, is the founder of Business of Architecture and a well-regarded architectural practice management expert. He's recognized for developing the SMART practice method for managing a smooth-running architectural practice. He's the author of 2 books, The Architect's Marketing Field Guide and Social Media for Architects. He's also host of the #1 rated interview podcast for architects, The Business of Architecture Show, where he interviews guests like M. Arthur Gensler Jr., Tom Main, and others. Enoch is a frequently invited speaker on the topic of business of architecture. Steve and Enoch will begin our presentation.
Thank you, Anna, for that wonderful presentation. Steve, good to see you here as well. We look forward to sharing the content today. Want to welcome everyone out today. Today's an interactive presentation. Please feel free to drop any questions into the chat box as we go along. As was mentioned, those will be monitored, and then we'll have a time to circle back at the end and answer those. So today, what you'll discover is how to make 2023 your most profitable year ever. And here's something very interesting. So just quickly a background. I started Business of Architecture back in 2012, actually it was 2012, right after the Great Recession. The reason I mention that is because as a young architect, I wanted to start my own firm. But what I knew how to do was I knew how to do architecture, but I had no idea about how to run a business. I had no idea how to get new clients. I had no idea how to manage people or finances. I had no idea about when to hire people, how to make those decisions, when to be able to reach out to prospective clients, how to price my fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there was a whole lot of things that I discovered that I didn't know. And through that process, I had the crazy idea to start a podcast because I wanted to talk to other successful architects and engineers who had run successful practices and figure out what's all this stuff about running a business that I have no idea about. And as I was doing that, I started to discover some pretty unconventional and controversial things about some counterintuitive secrets, shall we say, about practice management. And so today, the big promise for you is you'll discover one counterintuitive strategy for increasing your profit. This is something that most people don't talk about. We're going to talk about it here today. And then you'll also discover some software tools that can help you towards this end. Now, one of the challenges in today's market is perhaps one of the things that you may see here on the board. So we have a quick poll just to get a little pulse on where you're at right now. I'd like to ask you a question, get some engagement here. Which of the following is true for you or your firm? We have too much work, we don't have enough work, or we have the right amount of work. We call this the Goldilocks question. It's either porridge is too hot, too cold, or just right. And we'll give you a minute or two for these to roll in here, and then Anna will share the results from this. Let's see where are you at right here. All right, so those answers are rolling in here. Give you a couple more seconds to respond to the poll.
And if people are wondering, Enoch, why we have a cat on the slide, it's because
Why do we have a cat on the slide, Steve?
because this is a curious cat and it wants to know something.
It wants to know.
Okay.
Well, you know what happened to the curious cat?
Yeah, let's not go there right now.
Okay.
Was not too profitable for him.
Not too profitable. All right, Steve, you close that out. Okay, great. Okay, there we go. Look at that. So, you know, not surprising at all. 50% of those on the line today have too much work. 14% don't have enough work, and 36% have the right amount of work, which is great. All right. Okay, thanks, Steve, for putting that up there. Okay. Now, here's one of the challenges you may be experiencing, no matter which of those categories you're in. And actually, the strategies we'll be going over today deal with this particular strategy, we call the golden strategy, that is going to help you solve all of those issues. And if you have just the right amount of work, well, just great. Hang on here, and there's probably some value hopefully you'll get out of the presentation today. So as a practice owner or someone working in the field of engineering right now, you may be experiencing this as we go through this huge boom time here. As COVID is winding down, you may have too much work. And we know that too much work can almost be just as much of a problem as not having enough work, because ultimately what ends up happening is our team members end up getting more stretched. We feel more stretched. A lot of times we're tempted to bring on too much work. In other words, we overload ourselves. We push out the deadlines that we have to get that work done, and maybe even have to turn away work from repeat clients. And ultimately what this can reflect badly on the practice, because then people are wondering why it's taking us so long to get the work done, or at the worst case scenario, quality can decrease. So ultimately what can happen here is that it can lower staff morale. Team members feel like they're being micromanaged. They feel like their plate's too heavy. They're not seeing the big picture of why the firm is so busy at the moment. It deals with increased stress. This can roll over into family life. It can affect their team members' family lives. And a lot of times we'll see team members, oftentimes they may not quit, but it can definitely lower productivity. It can cause things like, I hear a lot of time practice owners, yeah, my employees are watching YouTube videos, or they're playing solitaire on their computer, social media, instead of working, because they're looking for some outlet in all the stress. Quality of work can suffer. That's not good for anyone. Client service suffers. The last thing you want to do is to have any tarnish to your good name and your reputation. And ultimately, there can be increased errors, because when we're completely revved up and our mind is working so quickly, it's difficult to slow things down and make sure that we're doing things accurately and appropriately. Now, the question here is, when we look at this conversation of not enough work or having too much work, the question is, what is the root cause here that we're going to look at? So one thing that I discovered very early on as we began to interview different practice owners is that the typical go-to solutions for running a more profitable practice were actually not the underlying levers that were causing the success of the most successful practices. And it was about 6 months into my journey of interviewing different firms and talking with practice owners and talking to practice management consultants that I began to see a clear pattern that a lot of what was being taught wasn't necessarily going to be the highest value effort. So I love this quote by Wyatt Earp, where he said, "Fast is fine, but accuracy is everything." So consider that in today's presentation, what we'd like to deliver to you is accurate thinking, because it's the accurate thinking in correctly identifying the root cause of low profitability or substandard profitability or lack of profitability. It's understanding that root cause is ultimately going to allow us to uproot those issues by the roots instead of just hacking at the branches, which ultimately can lead to those issues persisting and not being able to increase the profitability. Now, early on in my business career, I discovered very clearly that Although as an architect, I wasn't in it for money, I discovered very early that time is money. And that when I didn't have money, ultimately what it meant is that I was trying to take on more work than I could possibly handle. I was in scarcity about worrying that perhaps if I turned away work now, that I might lose out on work in the future. So it became very clear that actually increasing profitability, with that profitability, we could buy back time, we could take more freedom and ease, we could approach things in a more methodical and more easygoing manner in the practice and not be so rushed. So that's why money is important, one of the many reasons. And what I discovered is that as an architect, I was under the, I'm sorry about that. Let me go back one slide here. As an architect, I was under the delusion, or let's call it the illusion, that the secret to increasing profitability and to solving my issues as a practice owner was actually becoming more efficient. And I found that this is where we oftentimes go as professionals. I'm an architect by training, but a lot of times when we approach a problem, we look at it with our existing tool set, meaning that if we're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so what I found is when I was running my practice, and then also as we consulted with other architecture practice owners, as well as other structural engineering firms or MEP firms or electrical firms or design firms that we work with, what we've discovered is that oftentimes they'll approach any problem in the practice around, hey, look, we just need to get more efficient. We just need to work harder. We need to get better at our craft of what we do. But the problem here that I begin to discover is that you're probably already very, very good at what you do. So you're probably already very good at engineering. Sure, with a lot of practices, there could be some systems that could be implemented. There could be some smoothing out of the way that projects are delivered, but you very quickly get to a point of diminishing returns where you can continue to try to get more and more efficient. What we found through our experience is that 80% of practices have a decent amount of efficiency in the way they deliver work. And because of that, any additional effort put into the efficiency actually it decreases the increase. So there's actually less increase, less output in terms of the results that are delivered. So we may think, hey, it's going to give us more time, it's going to give us more profitability, but what we enter into is this idea of marginal diminishing returns, which economics tells us is basically that as we put more input into a system, that eventually we reach a point where more input actually results in less output, less increase of output happening. Okay, so this left me in a difficult place because, okay, if it's not efficiency, what possibly could it be? When we began to look at the most profitable practices and the most profitable firms, well, let's jump over here to the poll. Pardon me. Steve, you're controlling that. Let's jump here. Let's find out where you find yourself in terms of your profitability. Do you find yourself to be highly profitable, marginally profitable, or as I was when I began my practice many years ago, profit, what's that? Where are you at right now? Just go ahead and you should see the multiple choice questions are on the screen. Go ahead and pick the one that you feel most adequately, appropriately fits your category. Where are you at?
As a pixel perfect person, I love the fact that the second option, marginally profitable, has a different margin. Its space is slightly to the right. So interesting little mistake there.
Spoken like a true architect, Steve.
Actually, it's more of
always focused on the aesthetics.
That would keep me up all night long trying to get that M in the right alignment.
I know.
Okay.
As soon as we get a certain number of answers, we'll go and close this poll off here.
Hey, Anna, let's all see what it is.
Let's have a look here. Great. So we have a number of you are highly profitable. Excellent. Marginally. Now, I'm not sure about your world. In our world, highly profitable would be anything generally above 30%. So we're talking 40, 50, 60% profitable. Marginally profitable in our world would be maybe 10 to at the bottom. 20 is decent profit. Profit, what's profit? A loss or 0%, 5% profitability. Okay, look at that. So we have 66% marginally profitable, 28% highly, and 7% on the lower end of that. All right, thanks, Steve. Okay, so the very interesting thing that we discovered as we began to talk with practice owners is this. Got me, okay. what we discovered is that more important than the systems and the processes, than the efficiency of the firm, much more important, there were other factors like the geographic area that the firm was serving, particularly the clientele, the kind of clients and the kind of projects that the firms worked on. So what we discovered was very interesting. And what we discovered is that we can spend a lot of energy, effort, money, and time and effort trying to improve efficiency, or we can focus on, as Pareto's law tells us, the 80-20 law tells us we can focus on the 20% that delivers 80% of the value. So quickly, just a quick refresher on Pareto's law. The 80-20 principle was come up by an Italian economist, Wilfredo Pareto, and he was doing studies on land ownership in Italy. And as he was doing the study, what he discovered is that 80% of the land approximately was owned by 20% of the landowners. So he discovered there was a disproportionate amount of the land that was held by a proportionally much smaller amount of landowners. Since then, economists, behavioral economists, psychologists, sociologists have found that this is a pattern that shows up in nature. It's a pattern that shows up in business. It's a pattern that shows up in finance. A lot of times you may hear this in terms of personal productivity. So for instance, it's likely that if you were to look at the different activities that you do throughout the day and you then measure the output and the results that those activities deliver, you'd find that there's 20% of what you do that's actually highly profitable, highly leveraged, delivers a lot of results, and then there's the 80% of what you do that's left is marginally effective, that doesn't deliver as much results. So another way to state this 80-20 principle is that there is a law of the vital few and the trivial many. So as we look at increasing profitability of our practice, our approach has been, and what we found to be highly effective, and we'll go over a case study here at the end of the presentation, is instead of jumping in and just trying to be more efficient and trying to streamline things and trying to push something that already might be pretty good, trying to squeeze blood from a rock, we say, okay, let's step back for a second. What are the critical key levers that we could move in the practice that would have enormous output? What's the 20% of effort we could put in that would deliver 80% of the result? And what we've discovered is that a lot of it revolves around the kind of clients you accept, and the work you accept today, as Glenn Murcutt, who's a famous architect, says, informs the clients you get tomorrow. Not only that, but as you know, the kind of clients you accept can determine how often you're redoing work, the profitability of that work, the communication structure, because we know that not all clients and not all projects are considered equal. So what we find with this principle here is that actually by determining and being very careful about the clients that we accept, it can have huge difference in the profitability. So instead of trying to input a lot of effort in changing the efficiency of the practice, we can just, okay, why don't we go out there, let's take a look at the project mix, let's take a look at the clients, and let's just make some simple switches there that then will affect everything down the line. Because trying to improve the efficiency of a practice by hiring better people, by investing in training, better software platforms, better systems can be very, very costly. And again, it's moving something where the needle might just barely budge. As opposed to taking a look at the client mix, figuring out which clients are most profitable clients, which clients and products are the most profitable, funnest to work with, which ones are the least fun to work with, so to speak. I'm sure no one here on this webinar has any architect clients that they work with like that are perhaps less enjoyable to work with. So the principle here is that when we're going to get married, we need to choose carefully, because the proper upfront selection criteria can save a lot of money in therapist bills over time. All right, now this begs the question, how do we see which clients and which projects are more profitable? Because we want to take a data-based approach. We want to figure out, okay, if I can figure out who are the clients and projects that are most profitable, oftentimes we don't have that data at our fingertips. So to be able to implement this strategy, it's important that we get very, very clear on where we're at. We need to understand where we're at so we can understand then where we are going. And this is where I'd like to turn over to Steve, that has some great strategies and tools around getting the right data out of our practice so we can make these type of important decisions.
Okay, cool. Okay, so Enoch, you can hear me okay, and I'm gonna just see if I can advance this slide for us.
There we go, thank you.
Yeah, so and we're gonna launch our next poll question. And maybe this is poll question number 3, actually. So the slide says number 2. my question really is your firm satisfied with the technology that you're using to manage your projects? So first tech question we got here, but yeah, I have a state-of-the-art system implemented in our firm, so we are satisfied. Yes, but our system is kind of dated, it's hard to use, or no, we do have a management software, but we don't like it and we don't even use it. No, we just use some spreadsheets and other similar tools or manage projects. What's that? We just get the work and we do it and things get done. So there's a lot more options here than some of the previous poll questions that Enoch provided. But if you take a minute, and Anna, as you see the results slow down, let's go ahead and just share these results with everybody, and then I'll move on to my content here. Okay, so this is not a surprise to me, and you'll hear me talk about this, but the overwhelming majority of you, 56% of you, use just spreadsheets to run your firm. That's also, in my belief, why you're at this, because you are looking for profitability, because I'll talk about why spreadsheets are not a way to do it. Then you're tied about having a system. Almost 19% of you each have systems implemented and are happy, and have systems that are hard to use, so that's a different group. And then again, just like the question about profit, what's profit? You had only 7%, so we only have 7% about managing. So you'll probably see a correlation there. So Anna, you can close down that poll, and let's move on to my my first slide here. Okay, so while a lot of what Enoch was talking about had to do with kinds of ideas and concepts about what's important, what are those levers that you need to think about, and you know, the Glenn Murdoch, how does he pronounce his name?
Murcutt.
Murcutt, yeah. Concept, which, by the way, he truly believes this way. After he won the Pritzker Prize, I think people tend to change their business model because everybody wants to hire them. That's the Nobel Prize for architects. He hasn't changed his business model at all. He doesn't even do work outside of Australia. He continues to take only the projects he enjoys as his life. But Enoch's ideas, a lot of them have to do with your strategy. These are important things, but I want to do is for this middle third of the presentation, and I'm going to go a little fast because we lost a little time at the start with some tech problems here. But I really want to talk to you about technology and how it can aid in the operations of your firm and your projects. Now, as you can imagine here, I am a technologist. We have a software business. That's really what we focus on here. But after nearly 40 years in the industry, I've really come to realize that good software, like good design, it can solve all kinds of problems. But even better, the technology used when it's properly deployed in a firm is going to be able to give you incredible financial rewards. And I will admit, since I'm of that generation, there's a lot of gray hair here, you may not see it from the front, but I started practicing architecture when we still had drafting tables in the office. That's what we used. And there was this promise of computers making our lives easier and freeing us up so we could work less. It never truly materialized. Yes, CAD and later BIM technologies enabled us to design faster and better, but it's not as if we took that time savings and we left work earlier to have a more balanced life, or took the time savings and started to invest it into our own businesses to really focus on our operations and our marketing, things that Enoch is, an expert in, or R&D. We simply kind of just dug in deeper and we continue to do the work as hard as ever. But we were able to do more work and explore more design options and eventually deliver to our client a better project with theoretically fewer errors. But the same concept of what technology can enable you to do holds true when you think about the management of your firm. That's where you make and lose your money. So I have been in one-on-one contact with over 1,300 firm owners. I have witnessed countless sort of manually created reports using those spreadsheets, as the overwhelming majority of you here today are doing. Maybe they're prepared by managers and they allege to calculate the profitability of their projects or define the overall project schedule. But we find that when you compare what people do manually to what happens when you have a system in place, a technology system, it's a very different story. in the end, everything in the world of accounting needs to be reconciled. So if you have some spreadsheets, they're going to tell you certain stories that will actually conflict with the story you're going to hear from a rigorous accounting system. So if you want to hear facts, not fiction, everything that touches money in your firm, and pretty much every minute you spend, every hour you spend, that's actually touching an accounting system the way we define it. It shouldn't be subject to human manipulation. So if your firm uses spreadsheets to run your business, I can promise you this is hurting your profitability. And I have done a complete webinar on that subject, but I'll just summarize it and say you need real-time information about your firm and your project financial performance so you can deal with problems as they are happening and not triage these things typically weeks after when you get these spreadsheet reports, and it's really too late for you to do anything. So if you're looking for truth, spreadsheets are not going to be relied upon because they're being prepared by humans. The answer is going to lie in technology more than any individual. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you just a quick tour. I'm going to make it as fast as possible because we have really just a half an hour left here, and I want to bring Enoch back in for the final third here, and he has a great case study to share with you. But this is a tour of our own solution. I'm not saying that that's the only solution, but you should always do research into it. I just want you to kind of see and understand, if you're not familiar and you're living in the world of spreadsheets, what you're missing out on. So this is a solution designed specifically for the AE industry. It kind of addresses all the business and project issues that are really necessary to have a profitable firm. And on this slide, I am looking into the performance of one of my projects. It's called Spotlight Theaters. And what is happening here is something that can't happen when you use a spreadsheet. This is a dashboard reporting in real time what's happening with regard to the financials at the project level. And as things are changing behind the scenes, maybe some employees are entering time records, from their desk or from their mobile phone, or maybe invoices have been created by somebody in admin, or maybe the invoices were being paid electronically by the client. The numbers on my dashboard are updating right before my eyes. So I can instantly see that this project is currently at a 19% profit margin. Now it says we spent $667,000 in order to earn the $829,000. So that's a profit of $161,000. While that appears great, since we target basically a baseline of the 20% profit, we're hovering very close to that. I can also have the ability to drill down into every phase of that project. This may not be as typical for engineering firms, but every architect does like to break their project into phases. And notice how in just the contract documents phase alone, we only have a 7% profit margin. That gives me cause for concern. Clearly something is either wrong with how we're producing the work, or maybe we are behind in our billing. Now I do see that we have in the upper left a little more than $12,000 of work in progress that's related to the contract document phase that hasn't yet been invoiced. So that gives me a little bit of hope. But just imagine if I had 0 in the WIP value. And this is our CD phase. The contract documents is typically the most profitable phase for any architect, since the work is perfunctory. Your client really isn't involved in meddling with how you produce the documentation. Now, this type of analysis, it needs to be available 24/7 to your managers. When you give them that kind of power, that's when you elevate them from the mere role of project manager to what I think is a much more desirable role. It's called a business manager. The project is really its own little business. And if a manager is given the right tools that allow them to control and ensure its profitability, then you're going to see that all of those projects that you have are going to roll up and make your firm much more profitable. Your firm is losing money when it takes time and resources to create this kind of insight because of the intrinsic costs to prepare that information, then the costs of the lost money from not being able to see those problems and fix them in real time. And then there's another cost, which is the employee who's taxed with preparing these reports is just not doing something that could be far more valuable to your bottom line. And if that's an overhead employee of yours, just think about all of the marketing efforts that really contribute to your bottom line that they could be doing rather than building spreadsheets for you. And of course, if you can't rely on a manager to glance at a project performance dashboard because that's an inconvenience, you can always have the system generate reports that look at any of the data presented to you in any fashion that you find valuable in an informative way. So here I've called up a project profitability report. We can look at, for example, all the projects I'm managing, see all the costs, see the margins by project and also by phase level. But again, I've been complaining about all the manual effort to create spreadsheets. So I had to actually log into the software and say, give me this report. And if that's too much work for you, then of course you can just have these reports produced automatically by the system on the schedule that makes sense for you. So I like to get reports on Friday afternoons, at 3 o'clock. Now the system knows that's what Steve wants. It will automatically run the numbers, generate the report, and send me an email at the desired day of the week and the time of the day that makes sense for me. Just imagine if somebody in my office worked all weekend long to prepare a report for me and left it on my desk on a Monday morning, and I don't look at it until Friday afternoons when I have time for it. And by then the data is an additional 5 days behind reality. So data always needs to be in real time. It needs to be real. So we just looked at a project performance. That's probably the first place you would want to go to understand project economics. But the same concept of performance holds true in our software because there's a lot of other income silos. So while the projects do drive your revenue, it's your employees that are going to drive your project. So in this example, I'm looking at the performance dashboard for one of our employees, Jan DeMarco, and I've actually set the date parameter to get an idea of how did she perform for us last year. I can set it for any date range I would like. And notice how I can see something called her effective bill rate. This gives me a picture as to what every hour of that employee's time was worth whenever she touched a project. We actually earn revenue. It's the beautiful thing about these systems is they can connect the dots of people's time and on their time cards and what's eventually billed on to the client and earned as revenue. Now, I can also see it's calculating out what is her ideal bill rate. And that's again where systems bring you business intelligence that allows you to make some better decisions. So it understands her utilization and her realization. It knows our profit expectations for our firm. And it states here that if I want to get my 20% profit, that's our benchmark, whenever Jan is billing on an hourly basis, look for her to bill out no less than $164 an hour. But it's also interesting here that the system takes all that same information and can even suggest the ideal pay rate for an employee based on how they have performed on whatever date range, again, you select. So it understands, again, her overhead multiplier, and it's suggesting that if we paid her $56 an hour, that's her base salary. In this case, I can pay her a little over $116,000 a year. We will make a 20% profit margin. But notice, last year, Jan actually brought us a 23% profit. So we spent $218,000 to keep her employed at our company last year, but she brought us $284,000 in revenue. And unless you are using a system like this, I would challenge everyone, all of you who are using those spreadsheets, to tell me how much revenue every employee brought your firm during any time period. And again, that's another feature of sophisticated accounting systems. It's business intelligence, which unlike artificial intelligence, business intelligence is going to give me information I would otherwise not be able to figure out. And then it leaves it up to me as to what kind of decisions I want to do with this kind of information. So again, our firm would have been very happy to pay Jan $262,000 in revenue. That would have been 20% more than we invested in her. So we have an extra $22,000. What am I going to do with that? Well, we ended up giving her a $10,000 bonus and a raise. We just gave her a cost of living increase, but we also wanted to invest in her some more. So we got her a little bit more computing power, and we also wanted to promote her so that she could help share her own skills with the staff as to how she is so successful. But what I probably don't want to do is I don't want to take the excess profit that Jan generated for the firm and blindly sink that into salaries and overhead for non-performing staff. I could visit this dashboard for every employee. This again is just a report that allows me to run these, and of course I can schedule those kinds of reports as well. Now, using software that's monitoring the aging of your receivables gives you a platform to manage collections in a way that you've never been able to do it before. So a great system like this is going to notify you when an invoice is in jeopardy of being paid, like it's late or it's due in 3 days. They're going to provide you tools so you can communicate with your client and keep a record of those discussions, because sometimes you might need to remind your client that they talked to you last week about the check was in the mail. Very often you'll have a client on the phone and they'll claim they don't have a copy of the invoice right now. That's fine. The system will automatically email them that invoice so they can open it up wherever they are and talk to you about what's going on there. And you'll notice there's a little blue Pay Now button. The system gives you the option to allow them to pay you electronically, right? By clicking that blue button. That, by the way, is where modern technology makes running a firm really a whole lot easier. I encourage everybody, as you research some systems, to get away from those spreadsheets, make sure you're investing in modern technology that takes advantages of changes in fintech, financial technology. The world of having a client tell you that that check is in the mail, those are long since past. Your system should allow them to pay through ACH for sure, credit card if you want, and you can even have the system automatically charge your client a processing fee if they use that credit card, which is a great benefit to them. Another advantage of moving into this kind of a system with electronic billing and electronic payments is it has features that if you take advantage of them, like the electronic invoicing, there's no overhead staff time invested in this. There's no manual accounting needed, since the system automatically records when a payment is made, marks the invoice as paid, auto reconciles, notifies the people in your firm that need to be notified that the bill was paid. So basically you have what we call zero-touch accounting. In addition, the days of waiting for checks to arrive in the mail and then have them sit in your office until you can carry them to the bank and deposit them, those are over. So please don't put your firm's cash flow at risk by running your firm like it was still 2015. There's one more thing I just have to add here, is your clients will enjoy the ability to pay electronically. It simplifies their lives. So the system you choose should give them the ability to determine the date of that payment. So they can receive the invoice from you today, and if it's not due for 30 days, they can take care of paying it right now, but have comfort in knowing that the funds won't move from their account to your account until that due date. How am I doing on timing here? Okay, I'm going to pass on the financial budgeting conversation right now, but I just want you to know that when you do use systems, they can look at where you've been spending your money, where you've been earning your money in the past, and help you project into the future. And monitoring that with your profit and loss on a monthly basis is a great way to make sure you are hitting your targets, because if you've got budget expectations for how you plan to spend your money and you're not making the money that you planned, you may not be able to deliver on those marketing promises. And this is this last thing I just want to share with you. This is just like 15 dashboards or widgets of the dashboards that we have over 50 of these kinds of widgets that you can use. So find out the data that's meaningful to you and your firm and then track it. And don't waste your time tracking stuff if you're not going to look at it, listen, and respond. Now here, my eye instantly goes down to that lower left where it's telling me 20% of my receivables are past due. So I should address that right after today's webinar. Or in the upper middle, the system looks live into all of our accounts, whether they're in our accounting system or bank accounts and 401k accounts and savings accounts, with money market funds, whatever you have. So I know, and I can have comfort in knowing that we have enough money to pay our upcoming bills in that little widget. Or down below in the lower right, I see that I have a problem with the Aspen Cultural Center. So I can drill down into that and find out why that project's losing money. And I'm sorry, Enoch, I lied. I had one more slide to share with you, to the group, which is if your firm doesn't have access to this data 24/7 from any device, you are a decade behind the times. Data is gold. It enables you to be in control. So please research modern systems and implement those really well. The return on the investment is going to be stunning. But more importantly, you, the people you work with, they're going to have greater freedom, they're going to become more efficient, and they're going to be happier. And of course, I will guarantee that when you use these systems properly, you will be more profitable. There was a tongue twister right there. And with that, Enoch, we only have maybe 17 minutes left. So you take us
Steve,
home.
yeah, all good. Fine, great. So what I love about Steve, what you just shared is that you went over, again, continuing this conversation with a high leverage, the 80-20. Right? So just for those of you attending today, consider the effort that it takes to improve efficiency compared to what it might take to improve collections. Okay, so we can see that there's another example of a high leverage activity. It's much easier to try to go out there and actually keep tabs on the money and collect the money using something like the software platform BQE Core that Steve shared with us than trying to just increase overall efficiency. He also went over another high leverage point, which is the effectiveness of the profitability per employee. These are the kind of things, going back to that Wyatt Earp quote, where fast is fine, but accuracy is everything. And without the proper data, we cannot be accurate. That's all there is to it. So let's say we're looking at the lever of looking at our clients and trying to figure out which ones are the leaders, which ones are the losers, so to speak. Where do we need to make some shifts in the kind of clientele or products we're serving? This is going to open up another problem, which is, okay, how do we get more work? This opens up a business development conversation. How do we then find these more profitable clients that are going to make our work more enjoyable, that are going to pay us more money, that's going to make our work more impactful, that's going to give our team members better morale, and overall improve the office culture and the experience of people working here? Well, I'm going to go over a three-part framework to be able to structure business development activities. And it just so happens that it begins with AEC. So A stands for ascertain. We're going to identify and ascertain who are the most profitable clients that we want to work with, and then who are the clients out there in the market that we need to be reaching out to, that we want to work with, that we want to start building relationships with. Step number 2 is what we call the engage step. By engage, we mean there needs to be some form of actually being able to engage those potential prospects in a conversation. And then last but not least is taking that to the next level by actually connecting with them both on a business level as well as an emotional level. Now, when we look at the last two steps of engaging and connecting, there's two basic strategies that we recommend you employ for business development. Because face it, if you're anything like me, you may be introvert by nature. I'm an introvert. And so a lot of times we need to find business development ways that work for us. Now, one of the myths about business development is that if we're busy, we don't need to develop new work. But oftentimes, being super busy is actually a symptom of working with clients that are demanding too much, that have a low profit margin, that are requiring a lot of input with very little output to show for it. And so this is the crazy part, even when we're very busy, oftentimes the solution to our problem is better business development, but we got to know how to do it. So when we look at the engage and connect step, strategy number 1 is what we call recreation, and strategy number 2 is what we call information. Make it fun and make it technical. So you can appeal to the craft side, provide industry white papers, perhaps start a podcast, perhaps get information out there to your potential clients about what you do. That's the information. And then recreation would be take people out for lunch, do enjoyable things together to build those relationships. This is how business development works from a very easy level. When it gets to the presentation stage of now you're presenting for new work, it's important to remember the iceberg effect, which is that oftentimes your clients or your prospects' motivators are the iceberg underneath the water, the things that are the motivators that are underneath what they're stating in their needs that they tell you, or perhaps in an RFP. Right? Oftentimes all we see is what's above the water, but the really important part is understanding at a deep level what our clients are trying to achieve. This is called the iceberg effect. Now I'm going to quickly go over here an example of a firm who we worked with where we basically implemented this strategy. If I can get the slides to advance here, there we go. AMK Studio based out of Newport Beach, California. So when we started working with Arlene and Katie, they, like many small practitioners, were doing everything in the practice. They had little definition of their roles. We helped them divide the roles between them. Katie's more on the technical side. Arlene is more the business development arm. She's the one that likes to be out in front of the people. So first thing we did was actually determine, okay, you're going to focus on business development, Arlene. Katie, you're going to focus on back of house and production. Making that simple shift alone allowed them to do the following. Arlene then spent time targeting new clientele, and then directly reaching out. So she set a goal that every day she would make a contact with a new potential client. And one of the clients they identified that were going to be more profitable for the practice, the kind of clients they aspired to work with. Through daily contacts and then information sharing, including consistent follow-up, they were able to achieve the following results. So this is just recent, hot off the presses. I spoke to them last week. Based upon this over year, so 12-month time period of implementing this strategy, they had a 6.5 times pipeline value increase in terms of pipeline of projects, 3.4 times business close. So in terms of the contracts that they've closed, has increased more than tripled, and then they have doubled the practice revenue. Now, all this happened, again, not because necessarily they decided, hey, look, we need to get more efficient, because if they would have done that, they would have had bloody hands. It would have been a very, very hard road for them to squeeze more profitability out of what they're doing. Instead, we took a higher level approach. Let's look at what are the big levers. Let's use the tools that Steve shared with us to be able to ascertain who are the most profitable clients and projects that we should go after. And then we worked on implementing those. Now, because of that, Arlene and Katie, they now have more free time. They're able to go on vacation. They're able to actually have a business that serves them instead of having the business run their lives. Steve, how are we doing on time?
Well, we've got about 10 minutes or 11 minutes left. Before we get to Q&A though, and I had a question for you too. We have one last poll question, and if you want to just launch the poll question, which is, as you saw, I was giving you a peek into our BQE core solution. If you think that this might be of interest to your firm, we would love to talk to you more about that later. So let us know if you wanted a demo, or if you want a free trial of our software, or you just want to speak to one of our specialists, or maybe you're already using Core, that'd be great too, or not at this time, no harm, no foul. Just let us know, and then with that, you can leave that up there if you'd like for a little bit, Anna. We're going to move to the Q&A, and I did have a question for you, because before I see, and I see I don't see any questions in yet, and I think Courtney, you'll come on if you start seeing some questions come in a second, but with your example, your case study, Enoch, just curious, they had revenues increased 2 times, I think is what you said, right? And right, but they brought in 3.4, whatever it was, times business. So is that they closed 3 times as many projects, or was that the value, the business value, revenue value of contract value?
Yeah, revenue value of contracts closed.
Okay. So why is their business then revenue only up twice if they're bringing in 3 times as much business?
It's a very good question, Steve. It's because it's a trailing effect, lag indicator versus leading indicator.
Okay.
Right. So whereas revenue would be cash collected in the past, it's kind of a backward-looking trend of what they've achieved in the past. Closed sales, of course, is contracts looking forward over the same time period.
So have they started hiring more people to handle that workload, and in order to take those vacations? You told me that they're
more people, and their profit is way up. So actually, they're not having to hire, they're not having to do a big hiring blitz. Actually, they're actually just bringing in much more profitable projects with the same team members and same staff. But they are in the market to hire someone. Yep.
And they get to take vacation.
Yeah, I mean, that's icing on the cake, right? Yeah, they are. Yeah. Arlene's telling me, I don't know. She and her husband are going to go somewhere for 2 weeks, which is like, she's like not used to doing this as a practice owner. She's like, we haven't taken a vacation in years.
Yeah,
so
it's nice. Okay, yeah, good job. So Courtney, did you can you unmute yourself and let us know if you've got some questions rolling through?
Yeah, I do think we have a bit of a shyer group, but we've gotten a few questions. One comes over from Ken. He wants to know, do you involve employees in providing hours they feel they need for a project scope?
Do you want me to start with that?
We recommend that from our side. We do. Steve, how about from your side?
Yeah, we're a very strong believer. If your employees don't know what's expected of them, they're not going to be able to perform as expected. So our software actually allows the employee to see what projects they're assigned to be working on, what activities in those projects, if the managers are so granular in how they break out their work, and how many hours they've been allocated. And they get to, while they put time in the time card, they get to actually get real-time feedback, seeing, oh, I was given, 30 hours to work on the plans, let's just say, and I've already put in 12, so what do I have remaining? So they get the real-time feedback as to what the expectations were. If you don't share it with people, it's all a mystery to them. They just come to work, they sit down at their desk, they just do stuff, and then you have to wait for the results to roll in the future, and it's generally not a favorable result.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what's measured improves. What's measured improves. So if your team members have no way to actually measure their performance against a goal, then they have no way to manage their own performance. This is going to turn into a headache for you as a manager, because this is where you're going to have to micromanage them. It's not fun for anyone.
Great. This one's for Enoch. It's about your 80-20 principle that you presented. This person wants to know, how do you decide what the 20% is?
Well, for starters, this is where you need data. So it depends on what area you're looking at. The beautiful thing about the 80-20 principle is that it can be used in every area of life. So I use it, for instance, with my own personal schedule. And for my own personal schedule, I usually find that every about 6 months, I start getting overwhelmed, taking on too many commitments, so then I need to scale back. And the way that I look at that in terms of my own personal schedule, just to give you an example, is it's more subjective. So I kind of look at my priorities and I try to figure out, okay, which are the things that are the highest leverage, which things bring my business and my effectiveness, which things lead towards my goal in the way that I want to head towards that goal. Okay, and then I'll basically list them out, prioritize, and say, okay, hey, look, can I cut off some of these things on the bottom that are not being very effective? Now, of course, when we're talking about things like profitability, clients, employees, this is something where a BQE core, a system like that, is going to be so valuable, because you're not going to have to be number crunching spreadsheets. I mean, I know firm owners that will spend days, a couple days, number crunching, trying to figure out what their profit was, trying to figure out these things about which employees are most profitable, which ones aren't profitable, which can go back into coaching or training them. However, with a system like BQE core, I mean, come on, it's a no-brainer. You can do it with a couple clicks of a button to get that very same data. So 2 answers to that. There could be subjective things where you look at and you prioritize, and the other thing would be using some sort of software platform or tool like BQE core that gives you that data right away and saves you a lot of time, so you can just get it and make those kind of decisions.
Yeah, this is great. Let me share a real story for you. One of the things that's always fun with us is when we get a new customer, we usually migrate data out of those spreadsheets. They'll have years of spreadsheet data. We'll port that over, map that into our software. And one of the most common things we see happen is, because we'll go straight to profitability during our training, is they will find out, we'll ask, who are the least profitable clients you have? And it'll turn out typically that you'll have a client who's a repeat client. They've been with you for years, maybe since you hung your shingle out, and they are the lowest profitability, because either the firm has been very shy, because they're such an important client to them, to change their billing rates, and 10 years have transpired that they've been working with them, so they're still billing them at the 2012 rates, or the client just asks for favors all the time and they do it because they're so beholden to it. So many firms find out that a good portion of their effort was going to a client who was really not bringing them the returns. And if they could just not fire that client, maybe sometimes it might get to that point, but revisit the subject of their fees with the client and understand why it's not it's bad business for them. And then they could take the effort that they were spending on a low profit producing project or client and put it to more profitable ones. That in itself makes a huge change. Most firms can never understand that with those Excel spreadsheets. They just can't see it, but it instantly becomes alive in a performance dashboard in our software. What else you got?
Absolutely, Steve. That's wonderful. Quickly, I wanted to let our attendees know that if you're like me and you're an introvert, one of the things that you can do to provide value to your clients, to keep those existing clients coming back, stave off the competition, but also attract potentially some new clients, are what we call thought leadership. So sharing informational innovations, industry benchmarks, things like that help position your practice as an expert. And so we put together a list of these kind of items that if you text the letters PDF to that phone number on the screen, if you just have your cell phone out right now, you can just text 559, 206-4774 and then text PDF to that number. I'll shoot you over that list of thought leadership ideas. If it's not something you want to do yourself, you can delegate that to a junior staff member. But this is the way that the world of marketing is going. And you can even see here with BQE, them presenting this webinar is a great example of that, of actually doing thought leadership, providing value to the marketplace. So that's how you can get access to that free PDF as a special gift from us and the team at Business of Architecture.
Cool. Good idea.
Thanks for that, Enoch. I think we probably have time for one more question. Keith asks, down to what level, staff engineers and project engineers, etc., do you think project performance information should be shared? My firm does not share any information except among the principals.
Well, I'll start with that one. I have a strong belief on all information. To me, transparency is really important. So if the firm principals are the only ones who get to see the results, then the other employees are just going to have to guess at what they think the results are. And they can be guessing the firm's not doing well based on how they're being paid, or the firm doing really well because they do great work, but it's not being shared with them. So if you have KPIs, you have key performance indicators that are important for the firm to monitor, like profitability is just one of many of these kinds of KPIs. And I have a whole webinar on KPIs, but share them with people. Then they will see and understand and be part of the solution to help get the firm to where what the principals feel is an important goal. So if you don't share it, people are going to think things, and ignorance is really never bliss. How about you, Enoch? What do you think?
Well said. Well said. Agree completely, Steve.
Okay.
Nothing to add. That's great.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, so Anna, I guess you should take over.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve and Enoch. Thank you very, very much. As we finish, please make sure to download your certificate of completion now from the handouts tab in the control panel, and a follow-up email will also be sent with the certificate. Thank you again, Steve and Enoch and everyone at BQE Software for this presentation. And thank you everyone who joined us today. And this ends today's webinar. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Good fun. Take care, everybody.